Welcome to the Quantum Conversations podcast. My name is Sarah Kleiner. Today, my co-host Carrie Bennett and I are going to be talking to you about these complex topics in quantum physics and circadian biology on an everyday person level. And that's really the goal of this podcast, is to bring these topics, which have been extremely transformative to Carrie and I in our own personal health journeys and our family's health journeys, as well as hundreds of clients over the last few years that have been applying this information. So Carrie and I have created this podcast to really take these more complex topics and make them understandable to the everyday person. We're so excited that you're here. If you do enjoy the show, please make sure to hit the like button and leave us a comment if you're on YouTube. And if you're on the audio only podcast, give a moment to leave us a review over on Apple or Spotify, and it will help to get the show out to more people. If you have a moment to share the conversation with a friend or family member in a Facebook group, Instagram post, or just via text, we would greatly, greatly appreciate it. And we really want to thank you for being here. Before we jump into today's show, I wanted to let you know that Carrie and I have several free resources, which you can find down in the show notes, as well as courses where we teach people about these topics and how to apply them to your everyday life. So if you enjoy our conversations and you want to learn more, make sure you head down to the show notes to check out my resources, Carrie's resources, my courses, and Carrie's courses. We also co-teach a course called Quantum Fertility, which helps women who have tried everything to improve their fertility and to get pregnant. We've had several women over the age of 40 who have had multiple other failed fertility treatments to have success after doing our program. So check that out below as well. And the last thing I want to let you know about is that Carrie and I are hosting a health transformation summit in January the 25th through the 31st. We have several speakers that we've handpicked that we believe are going to help you transform your health in 2024. There will be a link in the show notes for you to sign up. All the topics, all the speakers, they will be free. And if you decide you want to have the recordings, have lifetime access, you will also get a package of gift courses to come with the summit. So we are so excited to share this health transformation summit with you so that you can go ahead and really transform your health in 2024. Thank you so much for listening to the show. We are so glad to have you here, and let's jump into the conversation. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Quantum Conversations. We are so glad to have you here. And today we're going to talk about metabolism from the quantum lens.
Yeah, it's very different, right? Because you and I having, I think, come into health from the fitness perspective, this is going to sound very different than what you might have heard, even compared to calories, compared to macros. So we hope that you'll really engage with this information with an open mind and start to kind of explore metabolism from a different perspective.
Yeah. And that's the thing, Carrie and I both have a history of being fitness instructors, essentially, and working with clients and ourselves. Myself, I've had a lot of issues with my metabolism since I was a child, and finding this information about circadian rhythms, quantum biology has been life-changing for me. And I just kind of can't shut up about it because it's been that life-changing that I'm finally just not struggling. And I really want to help as many people as possible to not struggle as well.
Right. And so I'm the same way. I didn't necessarily struggle with my weight a ton. It was starting to creep up on me after 3 babies, stress, my adrenal fatigue, thyroid. I mean, all of a sudden I was just like, how come those don't fit anymore? Right? Like, that's weird, And so, but here's what's interesting, right? I never actively targeted weight loss in any capacity. It was an observation I made. I was like, oh, that's interesting. And over the course of just implementing circadian and quantum health stuff, my body got rid of what it no longer needed, right? I became more energy and I became way more energy efficient. And so my body was just like, okay, we don't have to hoard body fat right anymore. Like, it just not needed. And so my body naturally got rid of it. And it's, I hate to say this because I know a lot of people are struggling with this, but it's really easy to maintain now. Just because my body is finally, I'm finally living in an environment where my body feels like it's safe, it's supported, it knows what time of day it is, it's energy efficient, and the rest kind of just falls into place.
Yeah. And, I was just talking on YouTube, my channel, about metabolic health, and that whole 88% of people are metabolically unhealthy. That's actually, I didn't know, but it's now like 93% of people.
Wow.
Yeah. According to some work done in 2022 by Tufts University, it's now 93% of people. And
they did that original study on 88%. So they must have followed up, and wow, holy cow, holy cow.
so that number just continues to go up. I mean, that's a big jump, another 5%. And so we're basically looking at 7% of people are metabolically healthy. Do we really think it's just the food? Like, that's the thing. Yeah, it's a part of it, but is that like literally the only thing wrong?
We can't. We've got to broaden our horizon to this, into this, right? We have to look beyond overeating, because how many of us have done this and or know someone who counts every single calorie, all day long, and is for sure eating below what their body needs if you're looking at it from a caloric mindset, and it's not doing enough. It's not doing anything right. It really is a vicious cycle, actually, when you get into that when you get into kind of that mindset of it. So there's something, obviously, at this point we have to say, what in the environment is shifting metabolic function so drastically. And so yes, processed food's not great in any capacity. It's garbage. It's junk. It is not actually food. Toxins that we're exposed to also, that's no good either, right? That the amount of toxins we're exposed to is astronomical. So those two things do impact us. However, light is completely ignored, and the contribution of light to metabolism and light to metabolic efficiency. I don't know why it's ignored, because if you literally open up PubMed and type in like circadian rhythm and diabetes, or circadian rhythm, blood sugar. So, the research, there's tens of thousands of research articles. So it's there. It's just ignored because it's inconvenient, or medical professionals just don't have the training, or health practitioners don't have the training in what to do with that information, since it's out there.
Yeah. I've talked with doctors who specialize in metabolic health, and they don't understand why clear blue blockers don't work. They don't understand. They don't understand. They don't even understand blue blockers, period. I'm like, that's so, if you're going to be teaching people about metabolic health, and this is like an alternative doctor, you're going to be out there talking about metabolic health and teaching it, and you don't even understand how to use blue blockers and how that impacts the metabolism, you're missing a huge, huge piece for people, and making it way harder, I think, making it way harder for people.
Making it way more obsessive, in my opinion. It's like you have to count every single macro, or else you're not going to lose weight. Or you have to count every single calorie, track your steps, track this, track. And it's like, I don't think that's, I just know that's not the issue. Just from so much experience, it's not the issue. And maybe those strategies may have worked in the past, when we didn't have as much non-native EMF, as much artificial light at night exposure. I don't know about you, but everywhere around me, the streetlights went from being this very warm amber tone to like bright, like the brightest white LED spotlight that you could possibly have. And so like a lot is shifting in our environment at a fast pace that goes beyond just the amount of processed food that we're consuming on a regular basis. And so light really has to come into the equation. And so, should we start with like light and how that by itself can raise blood sugar?
I think so. Because I think it's funny. I even got a message in my Instagram today. Someone said, this light thing is so overblown. And I'm like, you just don't know, do you? So I think maybe we should talk a little bit about light and the metabolism, just to start off with.
Okay, let's start off with laying the precursor that there was an interesting trend that was being discovered in the research, which is shift workers, regardless of the amount of calories they were eating, are way more likely to develop diabetes. Okay. And so the assumption then was, wait, but diabetes has to do with the amount of sugar you're eating, right? That's got to be the only thing that plays a role. So we got to watch how much sugar you eat. And it turns out that, believe it or not, we can increase our blood sugar when we're under the wrong wavelengths of light, even if we're in a fasted state.
Yep.
And so what happens there, right? We've got this chemical control center in our brain called our hypothalamus, and our hypothalamus interfaces with a lot of different things. One of the things that it interfaces with is this big old protein, polypeptide called POMC, stands for pro-melanocortin, and it's POMC. And POMC, in response to light, chops itself up into smaller and smaller peptides, smaller and smaller proteins. And one of the 10 different peptides that it can be cut into, it gets cut into in response to blue light. So if there's blue light in the environment, POMC then basically tells gets cut into ACTH, which tells the hypothalamus, the HPA axis, to start producing cortisol. What does cortisol do? Cortisol is a glucocorticoid. It raises blood sugar. So the way that translates into is all of a sudden we're being exposed to so much of these blue wavelengths of light from before sunrise all day long in a typical office environment, after sunset, well into the night, staring at our phone screen, staring at a TV. And this is continually causing POMC to make ACTH, which causes cortisol to be released, right? So blue light raises cortisol, raises blood sugar. This is why we're seeing shift workers developing diabetes, regardless of what their diet looks like. It's because they are under fluorescent lighting or LED lighting at night, and that's causing this cortisol to be elevated and then the blood sugar follows.
Yep, exactly. And then most people that I know do shift work. They're pounding the sugar and the caffeine and all the things to keep themselves awake. I don't know a ton of shift workers that are doing the right stuff with nutrition and diet. But I think even if you do, you're still really kind of fighting this uphill battle. And there's things you can do with blue blockers and maybe wearing hats and fasting and things you can do to mitigate it. But it's just still going to be a lot more difficult, So
yeah, shift work is a tough position, right?
It really is. And we need doctors and we need these people doing it. So, we have to try to educate and see what we can do to help them. But it's still, if you have a choice of not doing it,
try not to and get off it. And if you want more information, like I really do. I know you've got a course, Sarah, Circadian Health for the Busy Persons. I know Dr. Max Gullhane talks on this a lot. He is an MD, so he's been through shift work. He gets it.
Yes.
But like as a worst case scenario, you really have to be aware of what you're consuming during an overnight shift. I would not touch sugar in any capacity. Frankly, I wouldn't touch food. I would eat before my shift work.
I wouldn't either.
Not when I'm under artificial light, and then eat again when I get home and sit outside to eat it. And I would be wearing at least my yellow toned blue blockers to mitigate some of that blue light signaling through the eyes.
100%.
But yeah, it's not ideal. But then the research got extended even further than that, right? It's not just shift workers. Now the research is showing exposure to artificial light at night is enough to drive obesity, to increase the incidence of diabetes and obesity. And these research articles looked at incident light coming in from things like streetlights into someone's bedroom and into someone's space during sleep. So it's outdoor light coming in that was enough to actually affect these pathways and increase blood sugar. I know. And so imagine what the effect is, which has also been studied, of us then inviting that artificial fake light into our lives at night by staring at screens and TV, mobile phone into the evening. We know for a fact that it raises cortisol and suppresses melatonin. And I know you and I have seen that in so many salivary cortisol panels, right? It's a very common thing to see. So all of a sudden, as cortisol should be at a low point and melatonin should start rising, all of a sudden, if we expose our eyes to that artificial light after sunset, the cortisol elevates, the melatonin suppresses. And with cortisol elevation, you have to always remember when cortisol is elevated, blood glucose goes with it.
Yep.
So they go hand in hand. So you want to be aware then, that begs the question, okay, so I want to avoid things that elevate cortisol like that, right? And so there's ways that we can view metabolism and supporting metabolic function that doesn't involve calorie counting, that doesn't involve macro counting, right? There's things that we can do that I think are very, very foundational when it comes to that. And so I am very aware of my light environment. I've been super aware of blocking artificial light at night now for the past, 7 to 10 years or so. And it makes a huge difference.
Huge. I mean, it's crazy. And I've got, we live in the city and we have houses. No, everyone keeps their lights on. We just have this person build a pool, and Dr. Sarah calls it a monstrosity. It's a literal monstrosity next door. He has a pool that all night long it flashes like purple and blue and green. It's like the pool is like flashing all night. And if I didn't have the blackout curtains and all the stuff that I have in here, I'd have like all these lights coming into my room constantly.
I know.
And that's just the reality of unless you can live off grid away from people have these spotlights and security lights that are just constantly going on. You've got city lights. It's never actually really dark in the city at all.
It's not.
Crazy.
And guess what? If people want to dive into this research, look up the research on nighttime light pollution and nocturnal animal health.
Oh, yeah.
Everything is being disrupted. It's not just human health, right? Everything is being disrupted because we're being exposed to wavelengths of light that don't exist after sunset. And now we're seeing all the downstream ramifications of it in terms of human health, wildlife health, you name it. And so, whichever avenue you need to explore to kind of start to wrap your brain around what light does and how impactful it is, look, it's there, right? It absolutely is there. And we're going to tell you that metabolic function is impaired by artificial light at night. Right? Yep. It absolutely is. And so one of the best things you can start doing is wearing those orange tone blue blockers after sunset or nightfall. If you're using the circadian app, nightfall at the very, very latest, you want those orange tone blue blockers on because you want to preserve melatonin, but you also want to stop that cortisol spike that's going to happen, right? As we expose our eyes to artificial light after sunset.
Yeah, it's not really a hard thing to do. You can get, you and I both like our nicer brands of Raw Optics and Viva Rays. They're nicer. They're more comfortable, more fashionable, but you can get a pair of Spectra 479s. I know that you tested those.
My husband, my kids, that's what they wear. They love those Spectra 479s. They're plastic industrial like rec specs, right? But like they do the trick. They're very good. That's what I will bring those if I'm going to a hotel room and I don't want to bring a more expensive pair of blue blockers. If I'm traveling or something like that, they're fine. They do the job. Yeah. They're great. And so don't make it feel like this has to be a cost thing either. I do. I love my Viva Rays. Obviously, I wear them all the time. They're great. Raw Optics I use quite a bit too as well, specifically during driving. Great as well. But you can find some very, very good brands at very reasonable prices. So,
yeah, exactly. And, the other thing about the artificial light at night and the cortisol blood sugar issue is whenever your blood sugar is dysregulated, you are going to be at risk for all kinds of metabolic issues and hormone issues. Like the hormone issues are crazy. The amount of women that have told me that they were having hot flashes and they were doing all my stuff and they're like, I'm doing your leptin reset. And I'm like, you wearing blue blockers after sunset? No. I'm like, do it.
Good point.
How did you miss that on like day one? But they start doing it and doesn't happen for everyone, but so many women have told me literally the last change they needed to do to get rid of these hot flashes was the blue blockers. And that's when you look at leptin and you look at insulin resistance, blood sugar issues, blood sugar swings, that can cause hot flashes, PCOS, infertility. All of these hormonal issues have a root in your blood sugar being mismanaged and having these spikes. And again, when you think about this issue with light, bringing your blood sugar up, even in the absence of food, it makes perfect sense. But when you just tell someone, grab a pair of blue blockers, make sure you wear them after sunset, they're like, no, that's too easy for it to actually be impactfthen
Or it just sounds too stupid for some people.
It just sounds stupid. Like, I don't want to wear those dumb glasses. They're uncomfortable, whatever. But then they actually do it. And a lot of these hormone issues, they're like, wait a second. I'm like, yes, because that it is so tied to the blood sugar, the cortisol. And when those things, your blood sugar and your cortisol are a mess and you're leptin resistant, the downstream impact is hormonal dysfunction. your body getting the signal that it needs to store fat, that it needs to slow down, that it's in danger. And, you can calorie track, macro track, and do all these things for your hormones. But if you're not doing this thing, you will only get so far, in my experience and from what I've seen with literally thousands of people at this point.
Yeah. Or you'll get people who might make some progress with macros, but then it's nothing is sustainable, right? Like this really is the foundation.
You get only so far. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. The other thing about that I think is important to enter into this conversation, it doesn't tie directly necessarily to metabolism, but you did mention, PCOS and hormone imbalances. There's a reason why we're also seeing things like breast cancer and ovarian cancer and uterine cancer, prostate cancer skyrocketing.
Thyroid cancer,
and right. It's exactly tied to this dysregulation at night, this dysregulation of cortisol. You essentially get a secondary surge of all these hormones that are not supposed to be elevated at that time, and it's just very disruptive overall. So what we're talking about transcends just metabolism, right? This is just true for optimum human health in so many different capacities. But if you happen to be looking for needing metabolic support, again, this is foundational, right? This is absolutely foundational, is to block the artificial light at night, sleep in a dark bedroom, unplug your Wi-Fi router, keep your cell phone out of the bedroom or put it on airplane mode far away from you. Like, right, there's some foundational things that you really want to do to set your body up for being able to gain metabolic flexibility, because it's not feeling like it's under the state of threat, which would keep cortisol elevated.
Right. And the phone in the bedroom is a huge one. It's so funny. I had a lady that's been, messaging me on Instagram for a while, and she's like, I bought your course and I'm doing everything, did your Leptin course and having great improvements. But Sarah, I tell you what, this New Year's, January, I decided I'm going to take my phone out of the bedroom and stop the evening scroll up. She was still doing it with blue blockers on, right? She's like, I had my phone screen on red and wearing the blue blockers, and I was still scrolling, and I still kept my phone beside the bed. Well, she's like, finally, I decided I'm going to bite the bullet. I'm going to take it out. I'm going to stop doing this. And she's like, the sleep I'm having is so much better from that little change. And she's like, and I'm having more dreams than I've ever had. She's like, is that normal to just be having these crazy, vivid dreams that I actually remember? And I haven't had those in years. I'm like,
yes, absolutely. You got to get, those non-native EMFs are really debilitating to melatonin. They're not supportive of the nervous system. And frankly, I hate to say this because I love airplane mode, but there are longitudinal EMFs that can still be emitted in certain capacities, right? Or if you put something in a Faraday cage, like, you really want to distance yourself, put it on airplane mode and distance yourself as far away as you possibly can. And that way you're creating an environment where your nervous system feels supported, where your ability to drop into those deeper brainwave states, where you can get into those beautiful dream states, which is, I love it. I think, like, one of the things I've been playing around with is lucid dreaming. I think dreaming is a really key indicator of metabolic health, of redox potential, right? Of circadian health even. So dreaming is a very interesting indicator of a lot of different, healthy processes occurring in the body.
Yeah. And that's funny. If you go into I have a private group, like you have a private community as well. If you just type into the search bar, dreams or dreaming, you get probably 20, 30 posts of people being like, oh my gosh, I'm on day 7 of your leptin reset. Now I'm having dreams. Is this normal? Like, they're it's so funny. And I always tell people, when you join the group, make sure you hit the search bar before you post something. But the dreams posting is like very consistent with people who are just starting. And it's like, yeah, this is, something that you don't talk about. We don't talk about when it comes to redox potential or metabolic health or health in general. But if you're not having dreams, then that's a sign, and you're not remembering them. There's a sign something is not right,
Yeah. I have a very out there view on dreams, so I'm not going to go into it right now.
Oh no, that's another episode, because I want to hear it.
I say that weird talk. Like, if you think what I say now is weird, I say that weird chat for my private community, because I'm not ready to put that out there on YouTube. The YouTube world is always already like, that lady's.
I know YouTube already thinks that we're both crazy, but that's fine. I did a bunch of stuff on lucid dreaming like years ago. I did a bunch of workshops and was playing around with it. So I definitely want to have this maybe offline.
Yeah.
And then we'll see if we can bring it to a normal person's level for for the podcast.
Yeah, like make it more, more accessible,
Yeah.
less weird.
Exactly.
But it's a good sign. It's a good sign of health in general. So that's cool to hear that that's what your program is help. I mean, people are observing that. So that's neat. But I mean, back to the whole metabolic conversation. What, again, as blood sugar is elevated, insulin gets elevated, right? So blue light at night, cortisol elevated, blood sugar elevated. The body doesn't want blood sugar to stay elevated. That is a threatening state for the blood, right? Because sugar can damage things when it stays in the blood for too long. So the body has this mechanism of releasing a hormone called insulin to clear it. So insulin gets released, and insulin says, okay, we got to bring blood sugar back to what would be a healthy range, right? And so insulin starts to help blood sugar get pulled into the cells. But when insulin is elevated, especially at night, right? When insulin is elevated, we can't have proper leptin signaling, which I know is your huge topic right here, right? Because in the parts of the brain where leptin is designed at nighttime, we're designed to go to bed, fasted state, right? We're designed to the body's designed to get this basically this release of leptin from fat. That leptin is supposed to travel to the hypothalamus and say, beep, beep, boop, boop. Carrie has this much body fat, right, stored on her. She's got this much glucose. Like this is the metabolic state of her storage and her metabolic, what she has available as energy if she needs it tomorrow to fight or flee or make a baby, right? And leptin needs to do that every single night. Leptin needs to make that download. And when leptin can make that download, I will get appropriate hunger signaling the next day. I'll get appropriate hormone signaling the next day. Like there's a lot of downstream ramifications. But as you very well know, Sarah, insulin and leptin compete in the brain for that to communicate. So all of a sudden, insulin's there making some communications. Leptin can't dock. And so if leptin can't dock consistently night after night after night and make that communication, what's the body going to assume? It's going to assume it's starving, right? It's going to be like, hey, my gas gauge is broken. My fuel gauge is broken. So I don't know how much fuel's in the tank. Might as well assume that we're running on empty and just load up. And so we increase hunger for especially for those really hyper palatable foods, right? So we increase hunger for processed foods, pretty much sugary foods. And the body also then starts to downregulate things. The thyroid says, okay, we won't expend as much, because we're not quite sure. These ramifications really, they add up over time to become really, what you typically see. You see the hypothyroidism, you see a stuck metabolism, you see the hormone imbalances, you see also, because artificial light is tied to anxiety and depression as well. So you see the anxiety, the depression, these things cluster together. And I hope you can start to see why they're clustering together.
Yeah, exactly. It's all related. It's nothing exists in a vacuum. It all is related. And this issue with leptin resistance is absolutely huge, and when insulin is elevated, again, leptin can't dock to the hypothalamus. Your body's not getting this information exchange. It's not getting the download. And so just literally doesn't know what to do. It's so simple. But so many people are leptin resistant and they can't figure out why. And I was leptin resistant for years. There's also a relation, obviously the relationship between cortisol and leptin, seeing daytime cortisol levels being way, way elevated and the inability of leptin to dock to the hypothalamus. So it's, directly what we're doing in the evening. And then also are you elevating your cortisol levels all day long and creating another issue?
Let's talk about that then. So what we know we've talked about this, right? There's certain things that we want cortisol to be elevated in the morning in response to sunrise, basically, right? That's when we're designed to get this cortisol surge. And you will have some people have a little bit of an extra blood sugar elevation at that time, cortisol awakening response, it can be called, right? So that's a common thing that you could see, but that quote unquote should be our cortisol peak for the day. Instead, however, I know you see this and I do too, where I wake up and I check my phone first thing in the morning, splash of cortisol. I drive to the gym and do a really, really hardcore boot camp class underneath artificial light, surge of cortisol. I
Yep.
drank coffee before that on an empty stomach because I heard that was supposed to help me mobilize fat during my workout, right?
Fasting. Yep.
Surge of cortisol, right? So like, and then again, okay, I get home. Well, gosh, I want to do intermittent fasting, right? So I'm going to going to have some coffee and push off my first meal until 2 p.m. Cortisol, cortisol, cortisol. And so
Yep.
with that, it's blood sugar, blood sugar, blood sugar. Leptin can't dock, right? Because blood sugar elevated, insulin elevated, leptin can't communicate. So again, the body gets into this state of how much energy do I have on my body? And we'll see two patterns, right? Actually, we'll see hoard, which looks like someone who's maintaining higher amounts of body fat, right? What we would call sluggish metabolism, or we'll see very low leptin as well. Very low leptin is a different category. I do want to talk about that like towards this because I'm seeing that more and more in people.
Yeah. Maybe we talk about that in part 2.
Yeah, we can talk about low leptin. Yeah, this is going to be a long episode, so we can talk about low leptin in part 2 for sure. But yeah, it's just a common thing that we see, right? When it comes to, I don't know, you and I did intermittent fasting like that, right? We did exercise like that.
And I wondered why I was struggling with my weight and I was inflamed looking all the time.
Puffy, right?
My face was super
but like
puffy.
I felt like why do I feel inflamed?
Right.
Yeah, puffy
and I would be teaching yoga classes in my like little cute yoga outfits, and I'd put everything on and just be like, oh, I just don't feel good in this. I don't feel right in this. And I see it all the time with people because we're told this message of like, just delay the meal, intermittent fast, wait as late in the day as you can to eat. And for a little bit, it worked for me. I was like very svelte and like, thin, and it worked for a little while. And then after a while, my body was like, no.
Yeah, same thing. It worked for a little bit because I had switched from eating energy balls at every 2.5 to 3 hours because I would make myself hangry if I didn't, right?
Yeah.
And so intermittent fasting felt freeing in a way because it was like, oh gosh,
all day.
I don't have to. I'm not hangry anymore, so I must be doing something good for my metabolism. Which temporarily there would maybe a bit of an adaptation that happened, but you can only ride on cortisol for so long, right? Before all of a sudden the body's just like, no. Like, ooh, yeah. She's not nourished. She's not or the body just is not getting the signals, right? In conjunction with the fact that I wasn't doing any circadian stuff either, right?
Right.
So my body had no clue what time of day it was. In fact, I was actively confusing my body by turning on fluorescent gym lights at 5 a.m., right? So it's like my body didn't know the time of day. I wasn't concerned about, blocking artificial light at night. I wasn't concerned about a dark sleep space. Like so many confusing signals.
I know. I look back and I'm like, well, no wonder.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and we hear the thing about it is like, it's nice to have the perspective of our own personal journeys, but also having worked in community with a community so that you can hear other people. And also, I still do one-on-one sessions it's a tight schedule, but I still do one-on-one sessions. And it's always nice to hear other people having these exact same experiences of when they pay attention to these signals, it just makes they're healing their bodies or getting their bodies to the state of where they feel like they're thriving. It makes it simple. It makes it easier. It speeds up, the results, if you will. And it doesn't feel as stressful actually in any capacity.
Right. That's the thing is it's like, it's not that hard. It actually feels good. It intuitively feels like the right thing to do and it feels good. And then you stop the struggle, and I literally had struggled with my weight my entire life, and I look at the rest of my family, I want to help them. I want to save them, but they still think I'm the crazy one. But I see, and I'm like, oh gosh, if we could just change a few of these things, it wouldn't be such a strain on your health, and it's not even that hard. And it's not diet culture, because they follow me. I was always like, I'm going to do this fast. I'm going to do this cleanse, the master cleanse, the cabbage soup diet, the, I could just go on and on and on about all the different diets and things I've tried, raw vegan, carnivore, this, that. And that's why my family doesn't want to listen to me, because they've seen me cycle through all this stuff and they're like, no, like, no, we're not doing that. But it's like, I don't do any of those crazy extreme diet things anymore. My diet is pretty like reasonable, I feel like, but I do this other stuff, it's the blue blockers and the blackout curtains and
going outside in the morning to set the
in the morning,
signaling.
every morning. My family
UVA
just
walk
to it.
whenever I can.
Yes.
Huge.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like this morning we're driving my daughter to school, the windows down, even though it's cold. My family's just like, okay, that's what we're doing, but it's these little things are not that hard for you to implement. And they just make such a huge difference because your body is finally getting the right signals. And when we're trying to force things and skip, the important signals for our body, which protein, fat in the morning is really, really helpful and important. It tells the body like, okay, we're safe. You don't have to store fat. Your thyroid can be regulated. The amount of people that are like, I just did these simple things that you recommended, changed the diet to more local seasonal, did the stuff in your leptin reset and even in your free stuff. And I have had to reduce my thyroid medication immensely because they start getting hypothyroid. They start being like, oh crap, or hyperthyroid. They start feeling hyperthyroid where they're like, oh my gosh. And I'm like, you might want to go to your doctor, because none of this is medical advice. Go to your doctor, get some blood tests, see, you might need to take that medication down. And 9 times out of 10, they need to take the medication down because their thyroid is saying, hey, I'm not under threat and danger anymore. My cortisol is not through the roof anymore and not running the show all the time. And I'm getting proper leptin signaling. And I can actually do what I need to do for the body, and that's the whole another piece of the puzzle is like, we're getting what we need.
Absolutely. And just piggybacking on that though, when in terms of this developing this metabolic efficiency and flexibility here, what we're coaching into the body is the body's ability to burn the nutrients you give it at a meal, signal to the brain what was just had, so we can dictate when hunger will be needed again, and then we can bridge the gap by burning fat as a fuel source, both between meals and also at night when we sleep. I think that's I think that delays a lot of people, or it keeps people inflamed. If you can't burn fat when you're sleeping, you're really reducing the amount of energy available to your body to go into repair, deep tissue repair. And so again, when I have people do this, it's like, okay, inflammatory markers go down very quickly. Pain and inflammation go down very quickly. Or, someone who would just comment something like, oh, typically it would take me a long time for this cuts like this to heal. And now they're healing a lot faster. It's like just things like little observations like that. You're becoming really efficient at using energy for all the different things, not just in terms of how your body physically looks, but about its ability to pull fat when it's needed and use it in real time for things like tissue repair.
Yeah. It's so key. And so maybe we can talk a little bit about this like bedtime snack issue. Cause I don't know about you, but I run up against it a lot anytime I talk about this issue. And then I have people in my group and in my programs that are like, I can't cut out the bedtime, I'm on week 1 and I can't cut out the bedtime snack. And I'm like, we have to, it takes time for you to train your body to do these things. If you come into my program or you come into this stuff eating 300 grams of carbs and eating a nightly bedtime snack, again, with like a lot of carbs, your insulin's going up before bed. I don't want you to go down to bare bones week 1. Like you have to coach your body into the ability to burn fat for fuel. Again, going back to that 93% of people being metabolically unhealthy, probably 93% of people, or even more than that, their body has no idea how to burn fat for fuel and how to get into that state. And it's not something that you necessarily can like quantum leap into, as much as I love quantum leaping in my health. You
got to coach it. You have to
coach it. Yeah, exactly.
What I kind of see in a very simplified way, I see kind of 3 different styles of metabolism. I see people who are metabolically flexible, right, where they can burn fat when it's needed and then carbs when they're there, right? They can bounce back and forth because those are different pathways. I see people who are very good sugar burners, but have a hard time tapping into fat, which means that phenotypically or physically, they may not look like there's any metabolic issues, but really they're only able to burn one pathway. And so that's just the sugar burning pathway. People like me, right? This was me when I was eating those energy balls every 2.5 to 3 hours. I would get hangry or like irritable, lightheaded, low energy, all that stuff, cravings. And then there's people who are not even good sugar burners anymore, right? Not burning fat as fuel source, not even efficient at burning sugar because there's insulin resistance that's set in, obviously leptin resistance that's set in. And now we're also then becoming inefficient sugar burners, which then just continues to promote storage mode. So, so yeah, it has to be coached. It absolutely has to be coached in. And so I think if you're currently someone who needs a bedtime snack, I always encourage people to consume something that will raise blood sugar and therefore will raise insulin the least, but will coat the satiety receptors and in the gut, right? And tell the brain, okay, we've just had some nourishment. And so I hate to say this, right? Because these aren't things that are enjoyable. These wouldn't be the average bedtime snack, but like, a little bit of ghee, right? A little bit of butter before bed.
Of butter with some crunchy sea salt.
Exactly. Like things where you're giving, that is energy dense stuff. But fat, when you eat fat in isolation, it won't cause a big surge of glucose or insulin. It really is a good way to keep insulin at a baseline level going into bedtime while still having something your body is digesting so that you can allow for leptin signaling to happen in the middle of the night.
Yeah, because if insulin is up, cortisol's up, leptin can't dock to the brain. And it's going to continue to be this negative feedback loop where the body has no idea what's going on, right?
And that's the same thing too in between meals. Like if you are a regular snacker and like if you really feel like you need something as you're coaching your body into maybe more spaced out meals, again, it's a fat
snack.
Exactly. It's a fat snack. And so if that's like if that's someplace where you start, it's like block the artificial light at night. If you need something before bedtime, it is ghee or butter or something along those lines, coconut oil. And then you wake up in the morning, like you have a dark bedroom, get the EMFs out, dark bedroom, wake up in the morning, block the artificial light until you go outside at sunrise, set your circadian rhythm at sunrise. It's a great place to start.
Exactly. Yeah. And I don't know who it was recently that said, if you're like so hooked on the sugar before bed, have maybe a teaspoon of honey before bed. Now, I've never tried that. It's not something I ever coached into my clients because I just kind of want to get them off of that whole sweet before bed thing. Yeah. But someone said, maybe try that out if you're really hooked onto every night I'm having like dates and raw milk and, 3 tablespoons of honey with my, maple syrup and stuff because it's supposed to help my adrenals and my.
I remember trying that at some point on the journey.
Not helpful.
It wasn't helpful for me. No, but so honey does have an interesting effect, right? Because it really can lower postprandial glucose release. So while it does taste sweet, it's not going to raise blood sugar in the same way as having the equivalent amount of sugar would. So I never really played around with it clinically. I've read the research on that. But interesting recommendation. But again, I'm like you. I would rather it's like if we can kind of Band-Aid that out, it would be better. I think ultimately in the long run, it's better because again, I know you've experienced this, me too, but just personally, but also in, just working with clients is that some people tasting that sweet on the tongue keeps this reward loop for cravings that just
going to keep it going. It's going to keep it going. Yep, exactly. Yeah. And we want to, as much as we can, just sever the ties there with that. Not to say you can't ever have something sweet, honey, fruit, any of that stuff during the day when it's seasonally appropriate. It's the middle of the day, but you just really don't want to do that before bed because of the impact that's going to have on the leptin signaling. As long as your insulin's up, it's not going to happen. And that's another reason why maybe to
I don't know if we want to chop this and go to the low leptin for next episode, but just one more thing I wanted to say was the reason why I think it's important not to eat after sunset kind of goes along the same line. Not only are we more we're more insulin resistant at night, but our body needs to go into this detox repair, like insulin needs to go down. We need to go into fat burning mode. And so cutting off your eating
breakdown mode, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Cutting off your eating window and eating breakfast, which is a hard thing for some people. I coach people on this all the time. They're like, I can't eat. I just don't. Start slow. You got to start slow. And then you've got to cut that evening eating out, because 9 times out of 10, people are eating too close to bed. They're eating that big meal at the end of the day. And so, yeah, maybe their body has been digesting all night. They're still full from the night before because your body never had the appropriate chance to break all that down.
Yeah.
And then, you're going to wake up not hungry. But if you can start cutting that eating window off, start eating at breakfast time, giving your body that appropriate signal, you're more insulin sensitive in the morning. Your body, the same meal that you eat at 8 a.m. is going to be metabolized completely differently at 8 p.m. And your body is going to be much more likely to go into storage mode. That's going to cause issues with your metabolism. And, there's the calories in, calories out. People don't want to hear this. I had someone really go after me and I was like, no, let me just give you like 10 studies. Go read them. He's like, oh, this study was done in 1977. It's not valid. I'm like, no, because this is like basic information that has been known for 40 plus years.
If anything, research nowadays is completely biased, right? Like, I mean,
it was like, really?
Okay, here's something too. If you're someone who wants a research study for everything that is stated that we've observed also clinically, I mean, they exist, but we might need to have a whole talk.
I think we should.
On research. I think we should. And break down the fact that it is biased due to funding. It's not, nothing controls for the light environment. It is, you could design a study to prove any outcome you wanted simply based on the design of the study. Like
I just put that in the quantum conversations bin of things that we need to talk about, because I agree wholeheartedly. Anytime that you make a claim on Instagram or YouTube or anywhere on the internet, the people will come for you. Where's the data to back this up? Where's the science? Where is it? And I get that. I understand that questioning. Send me the studies. I get it. I really do. It's a new concept that perhaps you've never heard of. It challenges a lot of concepts that you've previously held very dear and near to your heart. And so sure, you want to see some empirical data to show that it's true. But people need to stop living and dying by the scientific studies. And we got to do an episode.
We absolutely do. And people also have to stop negating anecdotal evidence or clinical observations, which I think far outweigh, in my opinion, any study, what any study could do. So yeah,
100%.
So so back to this metabolism thing. If at night you could eat fat, and if between meals you can eat fat, I mean, last little segue, because I know we got to go to part 2, is that I used to give this lecture in college when I was teaching one of these college courses about things like honey and maple syrup and agave, right? They were like, even fruit, in certain extents. And I always said, like, in nature, how much honey would you have had access to, right? You would have had to find that beehive. You'd have to chop it off the tree. You'd have to scare all those bees away in some way. You would have to, pick dead bee parts out of a honeycomb. Like, in actuality, and seasonally, at least right in Michigan, they're only making it a certain time of the year.
Right.
So our availability even to these natural sources of fructose is limited due to the availability in nature, both seasonally and because nature puts restrictions on fructose-rich foods. Or agave, I said, you want to go into a desert and find a prickly agave cactus? And we have to kind of wrap our brains around these things as well. Like I think our bodies are way much more in sugar burning metabolism because the exposure to all things sugar, even natural, is just astronomical.
Way too high
compared to what it would have been.
Yeah, absolutely. That we just did not, unless you grew up in the jungle, grew up on the equator, somewhere lush and beautiful, which a lot of us did not. We come from these like scarce environments where it's like the ground is ice, for a good part of the year. Like,
or there's a dry season. There's always a dry season. Even if you don't have seasonality, like wet, like cold and hot, you have dry seasons and wet seasons, right? I mean, there's always these periods where there's more and then there's less. So
yes. Yeah. It's important to remember. Well, I'm excited to talk about low leptin in part 2. So if you are interested, make sure you are subscribed to the show, and we will talk about that next week. Thanks, Carrie.